Hey there, and welcome back to another weekly Canadian real estate news recap here on Bald Prairie Real Estate. My name is Matthew Pfeifer from Real Estate Agent in Regina, and that is my trusted assistant, Matilda. The string of updated housing forecasts continues. CMHC is out with their most updated Canadian housing market outlook, and much like we've seen for the last couple of weeks, it's kind of a mixed message and a mixed bag of information. But of course, that's not all I'm going to be talking about this week. I've got a great look at how seasonality impacts real estate prices in Canada, and a couple more great articles for you guys to take a look at. But of course, we got to start this off with another terrible joke. The other day I was in the bookstore and I saw a book titled How to Solve 50% of Your Problems. So I decided to play it safe and I bought 2 copies. If you have a terrible joke that I can use in a future episode, put it in the comments below. Let's get into the news. So I want to start off talking about how seasonality impacts real estate prices in Canada, because it's going to tie into what I'm talking about later in this video when we're looking at CMHC's forecast. What we generally see is through the spring, prices and activity increase. There's often a lull in the summer and then uptick in the fall. Now that, of course, is a generalization. I've said it many times over that there is no such thing as a Canadian real estate market. There's a bunch of very hyper local regionalized markets in Canada, and what happens in one may not happen in the other. So if you're looking at the national picture, it might not affect your market the same way. So let's look at some charts here and see what's going on. Now with all of these charts, what I have done is taken the 5-year average month by month over the last 5 years and then just charted across so you guys can see what happens as prices continue on through the year. Let's look at Vancouver first here, because you can see with Vancouver, it's got less volatility than other markets in Canada, but you still see that trend. Prices increase in the spring, a flattening off in the summer, and a little of an uptick in the fall. I think there's less seasonality because Vancouver has less crazy weather and less harsh winters. When you look at Toronto, you see that same run up in prices in the spring, but once you get past March, typically prices fall off, they decline, they bottom out, and then they work their way back up through the fall market and usually end up about where they were when prices peaked out in March. In Montreal, again, you see that run up in prices, but then things flatten off through the summer with an increase in the fall. Now, when you look at the prairies though, you're going to see a different picture, because you see a run up in prices generally through the spring into the summer, and then as summer starts to wane and the weather starts to cool off, as do prices, and they start to decline, and this continues all the way on till the end of the year. So as you can see, while we see similarities in price trends, not every city is the same, and weather really impacts markets, especially where you see weather extremes. You see a much more significant impact on prices in those cities. Now let's talk about how inflation and interest rates are intertwined some more, because we've seen the Bank of Canada drive interest rates up in an effort to drive inflation down, and it is working. We're seeing inflation continue to trend down. So that's good news. But one of the things that Stats Canada looks at in their basket of goods when they're tracking inflation is the cost of mortgage interest. And with these higher interest rates, they're up about 30% year over year in terms of how much the percent change is. That is impacting those inflation numbers. In fact, right now, if you were to just take out mortgage interest out of that basket of goods, inflation would go from 4.3% to 3.5% instantaneously. Of course, that's not realistic, but that just shows you that mortgage interest is keeping inflation almost a full % higher than it would be. And this sentiment was actually echoed recently by CIBC's chief economist, Benjamin Tal. And he's a guy that you really should follow. He's very sharp, always seems to have his finger on the market, what exactly is going on, and really good insight. And that's what he talked about, how the higher mortgage interest rates is actually making inflation look worse than it really is. So keep an eye on what he has to say, because he's always got interesting things. Next up is an article from 𝗏𝗳𝗏𝗀𝗃 where they're looking at how much an individual or household would need to make per year in order to afford the average house in all these different cities. And they're assuming a 20% down payment, which of course in a number of Canadian cities is a very significant amount of money. And they basically ranked them from highest income needed to lowest income, and a lot of these probably aren't going to be a surprise. As always, I'll link this article in the description below. It's a really good article to read through, and it shows that price change and also how much affordability has gone up or down, and the income requirements going up or down. Shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that even though house prices have gone down, you actually need to have a higher income to afford houses in these cities because of how much interest rates have gone up. At number 3, Victoria, we need $168,000 a year income. In Toronto, you need a $217,000 income. And not surprising at all, in Vancouver, you need a $223,000 a year income to afford to buy a house. And if we go look at the most affordable cities where you need the lowest income, number 3, Calgary, $110,000. Number 2, Edmonton, $82,000. And number 1 on their list, Winnipeg, household income needs to be $75,000. I'm actually surprised they left both Saskatchewan cities off the list. Regina and Saskatoon are going to be more affordable. You need lower income, about $60,000 or $65,000 a year in order to buy the average house in those cities. And if you are thinking about buying a house, whether it's Vancouver, Saskatoon, Calgary, Edmonton, I've got you covered. If you don't already have a fantastic real estate agent, I can pair you up with somebody I know is a fantastic agent, somebody I trust, going to treat you right and find you that perfect house. Below in the description of this video is a link to my calendar where you can book me in for a buyer's consultation. I'm going to give you a call, learn about what's important to you and what's important to you in an agent, and get you set up with that perfect agent. Now let's get into this week's headline news article, and it is CMHC's updated housing forecast, where they're saying they expect prices have not bottomed out in Canada, but that they will rebound later on this year. Now, I've given CMHC a hard time in previous videos on some of their housing market outlooks, especially in early 2020 when they came out with a forecast, I think at the time, saying home prices were going to decline in 2020 like 17%. And of course, very quickly, that was obvious that wasn't going to happen. Yet at the time, CEO of CMHC was very insistent and steadfast on their forecast, and in fact got into arguments on Twitter with people saying that they were wrong, and anybody who disagreed with them had a vested interest in home prices going up. Again, it was obvious with what was going on in the market that that forecast was inaccurate and CMHC wouldn't change. When data changes, people should make adjustments to their forecasts. We saw it last year. The data changed and all the real estate companies started adjusting their forecasts. The information changes, the forecast should also change as well. So that's why I say with all of these forecasts, take them for entertainment value. Don't base your decision on whether you should or shouldn't buy based on a forecast becoming true, because more often than not, they're not going to be accurate. You buy a house when it's the right decision for your personal situation, not based on a forecast being right. Now, CMHC does a very good job with data collection, but what I find is often by the time their reports come out, they're almost outdated already. They often are forecasting what has already happened or what is currently happening in the market. And this report is a little bit of the same. It's kind of in line with what the consensus has been starting the year, that home prices in Canada would decline through the spring and then rebound at some point in the late spring or early summer and start working their way back up. The one-line headline for this report out of CMHC is that home prices would bottom out in Q2, rebound, start working their way up, and they actually project that home prices will increase all the way through 2025. Again, what did I say earlier about forecasts? Don't base your decision on buying a house on what a forecast says. But if we're going to see home prices bottom out in Q2 of this year, well, we already are in the second quarter of this year. So we potentially already at the point where home prices have bottomed out. If you look and follow my monthly Canadian real estate market updates, we have seen so far home prices starting to work their way back up. So we may have already had that bottoming out that CMHC and all the other forecasts were predicting. It just appears that it happened earlier than a lot of people were expecting. Now, I'm not saying that home prices in Canada have bottomed out and they're going to continue up to infinity forever. I've never said that and I never will. But right now, what we're seeing in the data is that if that bottom is supposed to be the spring, Q2-ish, somewhere in there, it may have happened earlier than everybody expected, and we are seeing prices start to increase. It also wouldn't be surprising if later on this year, as we get through the spring market and the summer, we see prices flatten or even drop a little bit. I talked about that earlier. That's the seasonality of home prices in Canada. And then don't be surprised if later in the year we see them start increasing again. Speaking of home prices in Canada, my monthly Canadian real estate market update comes out about the first week to 10 days of every single month, about 15 minutes in length, goes across the entire country and goes in depth on all the information as to what's going on in the Canadian housing market. But I do short videos as well. Those are going to be about 30 to 40 seconds long, and they come out a little quicker with just the quick snippets of information. So get subscribed to Bald Prairie Real Estate so you don't miss those videos as soon as they come out. If you want to check out the most recent monthly housing update right here, that's where that is. Please though, give this video a like and leave comments below because I love chatting with you guys in the comment section below. As always, thanks very much for watching.